Hello everyone and welcome back to Arsenal Pass, limited time only. I am your host Hayden, one half of Arsenal Pass of course, and this is a podcast on all things limited in flesh and blood. Specifically, this is season 1 and we're talking Outsiders Limited, focusing a lot on the Outsiders draft format in the upcoming Road to National season. We've got Pro Tour just around the corner and Skirmish season is in full effect as well, where I know a lot of people are playing Sealed and Draft as well as part of the Skirmish season. So I hope that our episodes here on Limited Time Only have been a big help for you out there if you are playing Skirmish season, and continue to be a help, a bit of a resource as we head towards Pro Tour and of course Road to National season. Now, last week we spoke about the first of our classes in Outsiders Limited. And when it comes to draft, we spoke about Assassin with Chu Heng of Singapore, and we have another top player from the APAC region joining us this week in Allen Lau from Hong Kong, part of Team Blue Pitch. Joins us to talk all things Ranger, which is super exciting. Now, I've been doing a lot of drafts. I've taken a little bit of a break between last episode and this episode. I haven't done a draft yet. I will be drafting again this week. Been busy, been away, been traveling. It's been good to be back. I am home. If you saw last week's episode, I was not. I was in producer Dave's house recording an episode. So shout out to producer Dave, who helps us with the podcast and videos and everything, for allowing me to use his office while I was traveling. I was in Christchurch. I got to play a skirmish though, which was super exciting. So after I recorded the episode with Chu Heng, I played a skirmish that weekend. I lied. I did get to draft. I drafted a ninja deck in the top 8 of the skirmish. It was a sealed skirmish top 8 draft. I made it all the way to the finals and played a ninja mirror. I was on Benji, played against Katsu, and got taken down by one of the old school, one of the OGs, original players from back in the day, the first ever calling winner, Isaac. So Isaac took me down on his Katsu deck. It was a great game. It was fun to play him, and I had a great day playing skirmish as well. Had a pretty good, or a pretty solid Azuri deck in sealed, and then drafted Benji in top 8. Ninja felt pretty open. There was just 2 of us at the table. I want to say a massive shout out and thank you to everyone who's been tuning into Limited Time Only, whether you've been doing it through our podcast platforms on Spotify, Apple, etc., or whether you've been right here on YouTube watching the videos and leaving comments. Again, if you're a fan of what we do here at Arsenal Pass, then dropping a like and leaving a comment plus subbing to the channel is really, really helpful. Just shows a little support going our way. You can also check us out on patreon.com/Arsenal Pass. If you liked the episode that I did, I called it episode 3.5. It was the episode 2 weeks ago where I did a draft walkthrough. I have another draft walkthrough that's about to go up on Patreon only, so I'm keeping those to Patreon. We're going to just do the main pod here, but there will be some draft walkthroughs going up on Patreon alongside all the other content that we do as Arsenal Pass on the AP Patreon. Anyway, let's get into it and talk about this week's pod. We have an awesome guest hailing all the way from Hong Kong, a player who has done very well on the international stage, top 16 at Worlds, just narrowly missing top 8 at the World Championship last year, top 4 at the Singapore Calling. And yeah, Allen Lau, just a very good player, a very good mind. And I want to shout out to Allen as well for agreeing to join me on the pod. You know, English is not Allen's first language. He did an amazing job with this pod. Talked a lot about Ranger and the key cards you want to draft, how you want to draft Ranger, what you're looking for to make a great Azalea deck and a great Riptide deck, and some of the ways that, you know, staying open, things like this. I want to give some of my thoughts because I let Allen talk a lot during this pod about Ranger because Allen had a lot to say and a lot of really good information to impart. So there's a couple of things that I didn't get a chance to talk about when it came to this podcast. I wanted to shout them out before we got into it when it comes to Ranger. I've been really enjoying drafting Ranger myself. Probably my favorite class, I think, to draft in Outsiders draft, to be honest. And I really like drafting Riptide in particular, but I have also had a lot of fun drafting Azalea. And I guess one of the things I wanted to talk about when it comes to drafting Ranger in particular is that I think one of the things I want to harp back on, and you'll hear about it a bit in the pod, is that in an interview with Allen, is that the difference between Azalea and Riptide is really, really big, I think. Azalea wants different cards, Riptide wants different cards. And what I mean by this, and Allen talks about it as well, is that Azalea, I think you really just, you can't have filler in your deck. You need pumps, you need attacks, you want a really succinct deck. And Riptide feels a little bit different, plays a little bit more defensively, wants to really leverage that hero ability, and you're flipping your arrow to get the effect, leveraging traps, leveraging cards to play from hand so that you can put arrows into your arsenal. I think that's a really big difference. And I did just want to just really highlight it again before we get into the main topic of the pod. But with that said, again, Allen does such a great job of articulating just kind of what it is to draft Ranger in this format and things you should go after. So let's get into it and talk to Allen. Limited time only, episode 5, and I have the pleasure of being joined by one of Hong Kong's finest players, Allen Lau. Allen, welcome to the pod. Thank you so much for coming on. I want to give you the opportunity to maybe introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do in Flesh and Blood.
Hi everyone, I'm Allen Lau from Bluefish, and thanks for having me. And I start playing TCG since 2015, and I started playing with Magic in the beginning. And I started play Flash and Buzz between the Crucible of War and Monarch season.
Yeah, and Alan, when we briefly, very briefly met at Worlds because I was playing against your good friend, also from Blue Pitch, in we both top 16 Worlds, so that's how I knew you. And of course, so did your teammate from Blue Pitch as well. And I know you came second in the Dev Challenge. Tell us a little bit about your I guess achievements or experience in Flesh and Blood. You top 16 Worlds. What other events have people maybe seen you at?
I'm top 16 at Worlds, and I'm also top 4 in the Singapore calling. And also my friend's thing is also a top 16 in the Worlds. And I usually practice with my teammates Blue Pitch, which is originally founded by a local game store called Battleface, which is the same BP. And I always testing with us, and it's very common that getting frustration when practicing with those guys because they are really good.
Yeah, I can attest. You have a very, very good team. I think quietly one of the best teams in the world, which people may not realize as well. I wanted to as well ask you, I guess, or I guess plug, but for those people maybe out there that haven't seen, you also create some content as well. You have a Blue Pitch YouTube channel. Is that right? Where you make some content as well?
Yeah, we usually make some videos about the rules explanation and the deck tech series, and we might we might delay some our deck tech series, and I think we will post it very soon after the Pro Tours because we are busy at the moment.
Yeah, yeah. So Ellen will be at Worlds with Xing, so you'll both be there and representing Blue Pitch. So look out for the content on Blue Pitch on YouTube as well. So Ellen, we're going to talk about how to draft Ranger in Outsiders. I know obviously you're furiously getting ready, testing for the Pro Tour. You told me before you've done about 26 drafts. So first of all, I want to ask you a little bit about what are your thoughts on Outsiders draft before we get into the sort of the Ranger of it all.
Yeah, I absolutely love the outsider draft a lot more than sealed in my previous experience. And I felt like LSS put a lot of effort on the draft experience in this set. And I think this is so far my best limited favorite, my favorite limited set since I don't have much experience on the WTR and the ARC. So since Monash, then this is my best limited experience so far.
Yeah, I mean, don't worry, you didn't miss much with Arcane Rising, so
Yeah.
don't worry about that, Alan. What is your favorite thing about this Outsiders draft? I know you did a lot of Uprising because of Worlds and the Singapore calling. Maybe you could compare it a little bit to that. What do you like about Outsiders Limited?
I love this limited experience because this set it felt like every heroes got a chance to feel. For my experience in Uprising draft, I forcing fight every time, and that's why my Elos can support me go to the Pro Tours because I think fight is broken. And other than that, this set is way more balancing compared with the other set I have experienced. And if some heroes are slightly overpowered, then more people draft, then other heroes will also get a chance to compete with them. Unlike fights that even 4 to 5 fights, I got to win a RTN with 5 fights in my final draft pot, but I don't think it will be possible in the outsider drafts. That's why I love this draft so much.
Yeah, the meta game that is involved with draft is something that's really fascinating, and I don't think we saw it with Uprising. Like you say, Fi and the ability for Fi to support. I had the same at Nationals. I 3-0'd a pod as a 5 of a Fi in the middle as well. Like it's very different in this format where there's a lot more balance to the cards. There's more generics, obviously. It feels like it feels like we really have a meta game. If people think assassins are strongest and you have 4 assassins, that really opens you up to things like Ranger, which we're going to talk about today. And if you're one of the two in Ranger or Ninja, you can have potentially a really powerful deck. So yeah, I've been finding the same experience with Outsiders Draft, which I just continue to want to do more and more. So you said you've done 26 drafts. Have you drafted a particular hero more than others or less than others so far?
For the top 10 games, I've drafted assassin more than other heroes because uh, based on the performance on the sealed event, then and how good usually that, and everyone on the Twitter they posted they've 4-0 or 5-0 in their pre-release with usury, then I absolutely try out, and I found out that is completely different with the seal format, because in seal you just put everything in it and you just make a usury pile, and it's just grindy, and maybe it's much more about the card quality. And after those 10 drafts, I shifted to other heroes, and compare with my 10 first game, I'm clearly doing better with ninjas or or rangers. Not meaning that assassin is bad, but my assuming the drafting pot is 4-2-2, which is 4 assassin, 2 ninjas, and 2 rangers. In this situation, I believe that rangers have a ability to deal with assassin heroes. And I have, for my testing, I have to do some weird thing, such as I first picked the Pendulum Trap. Hope I pronounce it right.
Yeah,
And
Pendulum
we
Trap.
all, yeah, me and my testing partner always joke about how strong Lava Burst in Uprising. And then
Yep.
every cast that fulfill Lava Burst that's 0 for 5, such as the Barrel Trap, then he just snap pick it because he just think this is a Lava Burst and I have to pick it. And so far, I have two I have 2-3-0 with my Kazoo and 2-3-0 with my Riptide, and I'm doing horribly in my Assassin Mirror, so I'm glad that Chewing helped me get through that episode.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Chu-Hing. Shout outs to Chu-Hing and talking to us about Assassin last week. Well, you're having all the success with Ranger, so that's why we've got you, Alan, to talk about Ranger. Why don't we get on and talk a bit about Ranger? And I want to start with a question. When it comes to drafting Ranger, what makes you want to play Ranger when it comes to Outsiders Limited? Like, why play a Ranger? What's drawing you to the heroes?
Um, First thing that why I like to draft Rangers in this set is because I said that I presume is 4-2-2, and the best thing of 2 Ranger is usually one is on Acilia and one is on Reply. That's the cards that they need to use are completely different. That's you can support one Acilia player and one Reply players. And to mention that, I think clearly Assassin is the best if there is 3 or fewer. But I think most people realize that, and I think it will end up in 4-2-2. So if you think that there are many rangers in the pot, although I love rangers, I suggest you don't jump into it. And talking about my first experience with rangers, that's my first what's it called? My first glance of the rangers is is not that good because we started play pre-release before drafting, and Ranger is as known as easily getting fatigued in the
Mm.
pre-release format, and in draft is a total different story, which I will talk about it later more times, which is my theory is total value. Is the
Yep.
complete a whole deck total values with the other decks. And what is total value? Total value is all attack value plus in your deck. And Rangers compared with two other hero is the most highest attack value because those highest number are covering that Rangers don't have a weapon to make sure you have a strong late game. Even with yellow arrows, you with aim counter you still come with 1 and 5. And I know it sounds very weird, but just imagining every red arrows in your deck is a red cut down to size, and then you just push it, and then one for aim counter, one for the arrows, and every card is a 2 for 6, brought for free, and it will be much better, I guess.
Yeah, that's such an interesting way to look at it, this kind of value proposition, like you say, when it comes to arrows, because the downside, people always say, well, you don't have a weapon and it's harder to use your whole hand. But if you can find ways to use your whole hand and you also have just a deck full of good attacks, and that's before we even start to talk about the non-attack actions, right? And the power of those when you combine them either with Dominate with Azalea or to leverage Riptide's hero ability. There's good things there as well. But your cards also say defend 3 as well, those arrows. There's so much utility to them. And the thing I've been finding about draft is, and you hit on a really good point, which I want to ask you about in a second, which is about the 4-2-2 split and 2 ranges. But when you are one of those 2 ranges, your card quality is so high, and you can have this, like you say, total value. I think it's such a cool way to look at it. Gives you so much, the density of your deck. You have so much damage that you can't really be fatigued, and also your value of trade actually gets above weapons because, something like a Spider's Bite is really great on offense, right? And it does make defending difficult, but the average value of the damage output of any given card in Assassin is actually a lot lower than what Ranger is. It's just about how you utilize your hand and the overall card quality. Assassin can do a lot more with a lot less, as opposed to Ranger really needs the tools. So with that said, I want to ask you a question, because something I found in my drafts is 3-4 Rangers feels really, really bad. 3 sometimes fine, okay, if I'm the Azalea and there's 2 Riptides, because what I found is that Azalea really wants different cards to Riptide, right? I want my Spire snipings, I want, these sorts of cards, I want I'm a bit more keen on, not having filler, I guess, whereas Riptide, I'm okay to have the defensive cards, I'm okay to have, a bit more value-oriented cards. Do you think if you were in a 3, maybe, or you're a Ranger, say you're a Riptide and there's 2 Riptides at the table, do you think it's just bad? Like, it's just not where you want to be? Is it that bad?
First thing, 4 is definitely a no for me. And I think 3 Ranger is the most number that I can play Rangers, and I think you want to avoid it, because if there are 3 Rangers, then the other 5 players are shared that 2 cards, which is not good for us. Then you might need to jump into either Kazoo or Assassin, and if you want to aim 2-1 or higher, then 2 Rangers is the best. And free range, if we don't talk about someone changing in the middle, then you better jump into Ranger after you're very sure that there are only 1 to 2 Rangers. That is the point.
Okay. Makes sense. And you can, by that point in the draft, you can see the card quality is higher. Maybe there is 3 Rangers, but just the card quality with these packs in particular seems to be good. There's a higher number of red arrows, or there's good number of generic pumps that maybe, you're seeing at the table, just because the card quality overall is higher. I want to ask, when it comes to drafting Ranger, you say, being 3 or 4 of a Ranger is really bad. So does that mean you want to stay open and go into Ranger later when you see the cards going around, or do you like to actually force it and try and send the signal, hey, I'm in Ranger, stay out? Like, how do you like to draft Ranger?
Um, this is a very interesting topic because I'm drafting Japanese Queen in Hong Kong, and according my observation and the pack distribution, that if you picking let's say you have a 3-2-2, which means three generics and other cards, two cards, then you pick a ranger card, then it will be a 3-2-2-1. But it's also a possibility that there is a four generic pair and rangers already missing one. That is, I think, is designed by the LSS that they want to the signal harder to read. I'm not sure that, but uh, given that possibility, I'm trying to avoid forcing into anything, even into assassin that great. Uh, if there's few people, and I still try to avoid it, but I think into a certain number of picks, I will suggest around 4 to 5 picks that you have to decide. Because my friend told me a theory that if a good card passing out, for example, you saw your red infecting shot in the pick four, then if you don't take it, then your next players will be will definitely pick it because it's best card of the deck, and everyone might pick generics in the 2 to 3 picks. Then they can decide to play rangers, and also is also there are one also very interesting factors that there are two good class cards in the same pack. For example, uh, there are one infecting short red and one withering short red, which is very rare. But in this case, if you pick even you pick a red infecting short, if you're passing the 30 shot to your next player, they will thought, the my upper guys they don't take rangers, then you may crush together and you will absolutely get a horrible draft experience. And I think if the player are experienced, that they will try to stay open and they will try to pick generics or those build cast cards to avoid it. So as I will not try to force it unless this there's some cards that worth forcing. That's why I love playing Rangers or Assassin more than Ninja, although I got a Ninja better performance and it rather than Assassin is because these are so many cards, more cards that when you sort it, you have to pick it. Then you don't have a reasons to play Ninja if you see a Dishonor or the Kick and those shitty Majestic, but you have a reason. If you saw a Death Touch, then you have no choice. But you must pick either Rangers or Assassin, and in those Majestic, I would say Shakedown, you have to pick Usury, and if you saw the Collapsing Trap, then you have to pick Riptide because it's a single-handed win the game card that you need to jump into. But either I see if I don't see this kind of phenomenal cast, then I won't jump into anything and I will stay.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think, Alan, I guess to kind of sum it up, you're wanting to stay open, and the card needs to be like really high quality if you at a first or second or even third pick it and go into a class early, because like you say, one thing actually as well is that we don't know what the print run's going to be for the Pro Tour. So sending signals could be even more difficult than it is already with, say, the current print run. Like you say, I think LSS have made a concerted effort to make it a little bit difficult when it comes to signals. You can have, like you say, you could have that 3-2-2-2, or you could have that 4-2-2-1, and especially it makes it really difficult if you take a class card. What did they take? I have no clue. You often, even if the person is forcing, or say, Alan, you're sitting to my right, I'm to your left, I won't know until pack 3, even if you're forcing, potentially what you're actually forcing, because the pack distribution can muddle it up. So it's really interesting. I think the top players I've talked to so far, yourself included, Alan, Chu Hing last week, prefer to stay open. And I think we'll see that when it comes to the Pro Tour. I think we'll see that kind of just in general, people will default a bit more to staying open, which in theory can leave some space for players who like to force, because they can potentially dictate to players that are staying open if people are choosing to stay open up until pick 4, pick 5, for instance. Potentially someone at the table, one person at the table forcing could get paid off. So, which is an interesting sort of dynamic, I think. I wanted to, I guess, ask you, let's talk a little bit about Azalea. Let's talk a little bit about Riptide specifically. Maybe you can give me, what are the strengths of each of these two heroes when it comes to Outsiders draft, and, why you want to be in them or not?
Okay, let's start with the Azalea first. She is very good when you can dominate her arrows in the first turn. That you get even you get a free damage, then you get a much advantage in the game. And also, dominate is a powerful keyword that's assessing, because the game will go grindy sometimes. So dominate can avoid it. And compared with Riptide, Azalea is more easy to get fatigue. It sounds weird because dominate should be avoiding fatigue, but my testing is because you take a lot of pumps. Just imagine every pump is a red hat trap, then use it, then we go into the graveyard. But my all arrows is always at least even the blue with an encounter is a 1-for-4. And when the game goes long enough, and not mention that the pumps is always 2 blocks, although it's very good with your dominate arrow. But besides that, dominate can avoid, because sometimes assassin they want to block their hands, and dominate avoid it. And it is also very interesting that Azalea is much harder than Riptide, because sometimes you don't have a way to look through your deck, such as the Wayfinder chest, Wayfinder head, and the Ravenous Rebel, or even you use Seek Horizon to put that up. You have to memorize your pitching order, which is defining a good Azalea player or a bad Azalea player in the draft. And more than that, it is good in the late game, because I just find out that if you have no decks in your deck, you can put an arrow and then you just use ability to give it dominate. So it's usually how the games end if it goes grindy. And Azalea is I think they tend to make the games go shorter, because total value is for Riptide majority of the time. And Azalea, if you can make the games very quickly, then you are good. And Riptide is, the strength of Riptide is that he is very good to utilize his both abilities. And I would say that the bolt, that's the weapons, but most of the time Riptide using is the aim counter, and the Azalea most of the time they are using the first ability, like putting the arrow. And just imagining every trap in Riptide decks, if it triggers, it's a 0-for-5, because 0-for-3 for the defense, 1 for the damage, and 1 for that you putting the card into arsenal face down, and then you can use the arrows, you can use the bow to give it aim counter, because you don't have because it's much harder to give a aim counter in Azalea, because you have to put it in the arsenal before a turn. But if you are if you are using Riptide, you use a trap in hand, and then you put a counter, you put a card in the arsenal, and then turn it face up as a 0-for-5, which makes my lava burst fury, and the and since most of the arrows you can give it an encounter, and encounter is always means +1 in the limited format. And if you do it long enough, then your total value will be very high. And I love Riptides. Actually, I have a preference with the Rangers hero, which is Riptide is always better than Assyria. But if there is only two Rangers, then I clearly believe that they can pick up both very good deck.
Yeah, Ranger. I mean, you said 0 for 5, but it can be more than that. You trigger Blood Rot Trap or something, and it could be 0 for 7. Like the value on those. You talk about Lava Vest Theory. Sometimes they're even better than that. But I think that's such a good way to look at it, is that if you can turn those traps into 0 for 5. You talked about first picking a Pendulum Trap earlier, which I almost fell off my chair when you said that, because I think that trap is, it's on total is pretty bad comparative. But if you can trigger these effects, you are getting, like you say, look at it, the 0 for 3 on defense, you get the +1 damage, plus you get the ability to put the arrow into Arsenal for free, which means that you can get the +1 by paying a resource. It's really, really valuable. And even some other times, one of the things I was finding is that towards the sort of middle of the game, when you're looking for a pivot turn, you can put a 0 cost arrow in, and you might not be putting an aim counter on it, but you're now no longer having to pay for that arrow. You come in with a Merkmire Grapnel, for instance, and you can really pivot off something like that, which is really powerful. So yeah, really, really good. The other thing that I really wanted to point out, because you talked about it with Azalea, was this kind of in-game loop with the arrow to make sure it has Dominate. I think that's something that people don't quite realize with Azalea's hero ability. So the hero ability, the arrow, and then you give it Dominate is really powerful. Plus, obviously, just second cycle and things like that. Azalea, I think, on the whole, you kind of alluded to it, Alan, harder to draft, but harder to play as well. I think when it comes to drafting, I don't know if you find this as well, but I find with Azalea a bit more difficult, because you really can't have filler in Azalea. Like, you really need a lot of good ways to see the top of your deck. You need a lot of good red arrows, and you need good pumps and cards. Like, even a card like Peace of Mind, which I think is a good card, can feel really, really bad in Azalea when you see it off the top, for instance.
Yeah. I would say that if you go for the Azalea, you should be aiming to go tall. That you highly prioritize your red pumps, no matter what, and the red scout, you should always pick it earlier, because the red, because always the 0 for 3 that's make your arrows dominate is always helping you closer the game quicker. And the key cards of the Assyria, first thing I want to mention is Infecting Shot, and the Withering Shot is always good in both ranges. So if you decided, don't have to hesitate. It's you have to pick it. And other than that, you have to, in case you can't really remember your second cycle, or in the middle of the game, that you might have to pick those cards that help you look through the top of your deck. For example, the key card is Wingfinder Crest, Spire Sniping, or Ravenous Rebel. Personally, I don't like Ravenous Rebel in this draft, just like I don't like Sonata Interest in the when I playing CC. Even it helped me get through a lot of times, but I just don't like this kind of randomness card unless you are using usury ability, or you have no cards in your deck. Oh, it's definitely a 0 for 5. Then on that time that is a good. But other than that, is Ravenous Rebel is good on Assyria, because it helps you make through a different decision. Then the rarest pumps always good, especially Blood Walk, the priority one. I may take a I may make a hot take about that. Priority token is the best, better than the Blood token in the limited form. Because my biggest enemy of Rangers should be Kazu, because should be should be ninja actually. And the when you compete with those ninjas, that priority token stops their Kotachi attacking even one turn, that you are leaking less 2 damage. And not mentioning that sometimes they have an arsenal that you just easily make out 3 damage. And in some emergency spots that if you are under pressure, that's even you should reflecting shot. Yeah, all we know is a very value, high quality arrows, even auto include in classical construct, and it still can't help you change the game. And if you prioritizing a Syria, then you should take it. Even though you have a chance that it passing back into second cycle, I suggest you don't take a risk and grab it early.
You just said you want to make sure you don't pass those cards around. What were those cards? Just to recap.
For instance, red pumps every lands with XX and red scouts, and I guess in Azalea you can highly pick red Ravenous Rebel, and of course the Spires like.
And I guess when it comes to Riptide, what are the cards that you maybe differentiate, you prioritize higher, and they're a bit different to Azalea? The first one that comes to mind is traps, right? Traps are, lava bursts, they're MVPs. So how high are you picking the traps when it comes to Ranger? And does it mean that if you're picking the traps, you're going to draft Riptide?
I think trap is what's supporting Riptide is viable in this limited format, because those trap is a very powerful one, and in Riptide's hand it could also deal 1 extra damage, which is huge in the middle of the late game. And I think majority of the trap is good, and I think they designed that the activate attack reaction one was the best, since it's most difficult to trigger. But for me, I think because I love every dual cast trap, and I will high pick it, and not only because they are good in reply, they also fit in every deck, and trap is a key that help us fight through those assassins, because it won't fed by the spider bite, which is very important. And also the trap are easier to trigger, which means they're easier to do 1 damage, and they are always very annoying to deal with. And Firewall Trap is MVP against Assassin, because against Usury they always activate it, and this is a 0 for 7, just like you say. And Loyalty Trap is I will put, I think even you using Loyalty Trap to block the Spider Bite, and I think it's good enough, because you are dealing 1 and stopping the next attack with their weapons, which I will mention later. And Inertia Trap is better the Inertia Shot. I forget, a Sedation Shot, because when you're using the defense reaction, it's harder to calculate your game plan. If you're using a Sedation Shot in the turn,
they can't see it coming, right?
Yeah. And that's the key. That's how you beat the Rangers viewers, which I don't assume that will happen a lot. But and other than that, not talking about the Majestic Trap, because it's hard to see in the draft. And those 3 yellow rare traps are good, and my favorites Endurance Trap. Every time you trigger it, and which means you win the game, because Uh, I always joke with my friends that codex of Verity is a 0 for 8. And if the pendulum trap trigger is a 0 for 10 or 0 for 11. So, and and you will facing a lot of assassin. I think your imagination is facing 2 assassin in the total draft. And this guy is a MVP against those heroes. And I think Falcon Wing is a bit trap card because it's very hard to, because you want to avoid the non-attack action in reply, and you just want every card blocks for free. And if the card doesn't attack, then that card should be a trap that helps you, makes you aim counters and go through the late game. And other than that, I think every arrows with aim counter +1 then is good enough. Reply is all about traps that help you fight through those non-rangers heroes. The final cards that I want to talk about in reply that might be useful sometimes is brush off. But this card has its flaws that if your brush off doesn't trigger, then you immediately lose the game. So just yeah.
That's true. What about I think it's a really good contrast of for the audience, for our listeners of limited time only, of the differences between Azalea. You pointed out some things between Azalea and Riptide. Riptide about the traps. Azalea, it's all about clean decks with pumps and arrows, and you want the key arrows, like you're saying, spire sniping, the infecting and wither shots. You want these. Plus, the pumps are so key. You want to be taking those. Go tall, go dominate. Make sure you've got cards to look at the top of your deck. Wayfarer's headpiece, for instance. Riptide, on the other hand, bit more malleable. There's a bit more give and take. You can have a bit more defensive cards. You can have these kind of just value proposition, like you're saying, the total value proposition. Arrows that can flip up, cards that put cards into your arsenal. So brush off, traps, for instance. I guess that's why you like brush off, right? Because it can trigger the hero ability. What about? I wanted to ask you if there's a few different cards.
Fervent Touch Red is a high priority card in the card. But in Australia, as you mentioned, that you want to have you want to have a pure Australia deck. Fervent Touch, we in my local game store, if this is a red, then you are very high priority to pick.
Let's finish off just kind of talking about some of the cards with equipment. You talked about Wayfarer's the headpiece when it comes to Azalea. What about for Riptide or just other equipment in general? What about, if I talk about the Seeker's equipment or the Threadbare Tunic, for instance? That's a card I really like to have in Ranger. Where do you see these pieces of equipment in your draft? Do you want to take them high? Are they lesser priority than the pumps and traps, etc.?
Yeah, the Tunic, because my first 10 games is on Assassin, then I have a very bad experience with the Tunic, but my friends suggest me to try out in the Rangers. Then I tried it. It's very good because you can block out your hands, then you can just use your Tunic to shoot with your arrows. And I think the Tunic is very high priority in both Rangers. And other than that, Seeker equipment, try to avoid it because I have a preference that I don't want to draft any piece of mind in the format. That assume is I think most of the free blocks or every free blocks that are better than piece of mind, which might little bit different than other people's, but I if I don't have a choice, then I will pick a Seeker equipment. And if you go more extreme, then Seeker equipment is also good in Celia too, because you can use it in the first turn to help you scry. It's also a way to help you look through your deck. And because I have more draft experience of replay that I have a much lower quality in those Seeker equipment. But if you are on a Seer, then you might have to consider to pick. If you have to choose a bad card into a secret equipment, then secret equipment is a better way. And equipment, for example, the toxic tips.
Toxic tips. Yeah.
Just don't activate and use it
Just
for
block them.
one block is
Yeah,
always better. And those kind of equipment is a key to help you fight through Kazu, because if they play for example, yellow surging strike, then as a reply perspective, you want to block it. And if you have it, this is the key that if you having one block that have you fight through the big ball or not, which is very important, because the ways that I think if you have drafting a good reply, that how you lose to Kazu is they natural combo it, and is very hard. And finally the one board equipment is also quite good in the mirrors, because I think everybody they plays any limited of outsiders, they have taste how good the window maker is. And the last thing I want to talk about is window maker is the best blue pitch, because either they block with two hands, that you are doing a already good job. It blocks for free, is a blue pitch. It has a relevant, I would say, what card called the barraging beta is, and those kind of card is as his power as low as, no matter how low it is, it still have an impact. So if you having a blue window maker or other blue, I would say, for example, skybound shot, please pick window maker instead.
Yeah. It's I mean, the power of the Seeker's equipment, I think, is it's come down for me personally. Like, it sounds like it's pretty low for you as well. And Peace of Mind, that's a really interesting take. I know myself, a lot of other players who have really keen on this format really like Peace of Mind, but definitely have had it be awkward. And I think your kind of philosophy of damage and value of cards makes sense, that maybe you wouldn't like a card like Peace of Mind. The other thing I want to say, when you talked about this kind of damage proposition or the total value proposition, and you talked about the blocking equipment, is I can see why you like those so much, because they are just total damage. And one of the things they do is really relevant, is they let you keep cards in hand. So you talked about Widowmaker means you only have to defend with one card plus equipment. Maybe you've got an on-hit effect from like a yellow arrow, for instance. Maybe that means you get to keep two cards as opposed to one card in your hand, or a red arrow plus a pump, for instance. That's really, really relevant, I think, when you're trying to beat these, or block a surging strike, for instance, with one card as opposed to two, because the way you're going to win games against a deck like Ninja as Ranger is dealing damage, is putting damage on them. If you sit back and are too defensive, you're going to lose the game, right? They're going to leak damage with the Kadachis. They're going to take you to the late game. They're going to find a natural combo line, like you say, and push through. So yeah, really interesting. So to finish up with Allen, we've talked a lot about Ranger. I want to do pack one, pick one, as we always do on limited time only. So Allen, I know in the notes there's a picture of the pack. Can you see the pack? Right, let's get into the pack, Allen. For our video viewers, you've got the pack up in front of you. For audio listeners, I'm just going to quickly go through the pack and tell you what we've got here in front of us. So we've got a yellow Twin Twisters, a yellow Come to Fight, a red Wither, yellow Brush Off, blue Destructive Deliberation, red Sedation Shot, yellow Head Jab, blue Freewheeling Renegades, yellow Withering Shot. We've got the Wayfarer's Crest. We've got our hybrid card. We've got Blood Rot Trap. We have blue Toxicity and blue Fletcher Blue Tail rather as our two rares. And then our foil is a yellow Backstab. So fairly a blue heavy pack here, and we have the 4 generic 2-2-1 split in this pack, with our 1 being Assassin.
First of all, I think this pack is extremely weaker than the last episode.
It's quite a bit weaker.
It's a blue heavy deck. The first I will shuffle to the top is the 0 for free assassin attention, the Wither.
Yeah, red Wither.
And and I don't like sedation cost so much. So I think I either pick the red weather or the cut rock check because cut rock check helps me to stay open. Weather is a good stealth card that you want to have in or in your Arachne deck or even a usury deck. But rock check, no matter what, is still blocking for free, and it have a very large upside sometimes. It helps you stay open. And other than that, the pack is weak. I give that I can switch either assassin or ranger. I will pick but rock check.
Yep. Blood Rock Trap, the pick for Allen. I mean, I agree. It's a pretty weak pack. Like you say, Chu Hing had a much nicer pack to look at last week, so sorry about that, Allen. But yeah, I think the cards for me as well. Blood Rock Trap, like you say, keeps you open, is a really good card, and then Wither is just one of the best red attacks you can have for Arachne. So I mean, I don't think there's too much else really to talk about there. A weaker pack on pick one, but an interesting one. Allen, I want to before we wrap up, I want to first of all say a massive thank you for coming on to Arsenal Pass Limited Time Only. It's been great having you on and to hear your knowledge about Ranger. I want to say good luck at Baltimore for you and the team. Is there any other kind of like last things you want to say about drafting Ranger? Maybe any kind of tips or tricks that you want to impart, and I'll just let you say anything else you want to as well.
I think people underappreciate the Rangers in the outsider formats because getting fatigue is everyone afraid of, and lacking a weapon that's and you are not drafting a good deck enough is actually might cause you a fatigued situation. But given that usually only two Rangers players, hopefully won't have more Rangers in my draft pot after this episode, and I think you should have a good quality cast, and I will suggest that relatively good Rangers card point should have 33 usable points, and in Rangers, a yellow is always get the job done. That's you might don't need to have blue because the fun fact is the blue arrows always pass in the last even the last 5 pick, you will see a blue arrows. My my observation is they always passing a blue mile granule or the blue skyburn shot, and but you may think this is a bad arrows. Other than that, I think its power level is certainly good enough. I think it's a good competitor in 4-2 draft pot. And if I have to compare those Rangers with other sets, I will say it is I will use a TOA for example. I think Lassie, Assyria is a better Lassie in TOA because you have a dominate. It can help you finish the game. The problem that Lassie in TOA is they don't have dominate. So I think Assyria is a better Lassie in TOA. And Riptide is just like Odin, but obviously not as good as Odin because Odin is a bonkers in TOA draft, and that I experienced in the draft is although it's a very little chance, but I mentioned it. It's if you getting hit with the rank halving, that turns your arsenal face up. And if you have a spare hands that you want to pick an encounter, make sure you can use your ability first to turn the up to get an encounter. Because if the triggers resolve, then they will turn your card ups and you don't have a time to give it encounter. And besides that is what I talk about is Assyria dominate arrows when you have no deck. Ravenous Rabble when you have low decks. And probably the last one is the Spring Load. If I'm correct, because you don't want Spring Load in your Rangers deck, but Spring Load is a great card that keep you open, and you can use it very easily if you take Riptide and you have a Tunic. It's a very useful combo. If I'm correct, I frequently put a card there. Spring will still get free attack, and
Yep.
this is also some little tricks about it.
Thank you again for coming on Limited Time Only. Arsenal Pass, Allen Lau. Again, wish you all the best at Pro Tour Baltimore. And until next time, we'll see you in the next episode.